sécher, fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est point jour. Sous les feuilles d'un chêne, je me suis fait sécher sur la plus haute branche, un rossignol chantait, fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est pas jour. Sur la plus haute branche, un rossignol chantait, chante rossignol, chante, toi qui as le cœur gai, fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est pas jour. Chante rossignol, chante, toi qui as le cœur gai, tu as un cœur à rire, moi je l'ai à pleurer. Fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est pas jour. Tu as un cœur à rire, moi je l'ai à pleurer. J'ai perdu ma maîtresse sans l'avoir méritée. Fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est point jour. J'ai perdu ma maîtresse sans l'avoir méritée. Pour un bouquet de roses que je lui refusais, fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est point jour. Pour un bouquet d'un rose que je lui refusais, je voudrais que la rose fût encore au rosier. Fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est point jour. Je voudrais que la rose fût encore au rosier, et moi et ma maîtresse dans les mêmes amitiés. Fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est point jour. Fonder le bois, chauffer le four, dormir la belle, il n'est point jour.
In Kent County of New Brunswick, there's 92 square miles that has been dedicated to a national park, the National Park of Kouchibouguac. again, that's Kouchibouguac, was actually started off the expropriation of land in 1969. What you're about to hear is 2 interviews from the Vautours, a family that have lived on that land well before the establishment of the park, and have an ongoing title case to return the land to the family and establish a proper title for those families that were expropriated from the park unfairly. For more on the expropriation and the history of the park, I recommend Ronald Rudin's Kouchibouguac. Although it does forsake some details and it is not a perfect recollection, it is the only piece of work that is out there that extensively does interviews with the families. The Vautour family in particular is known because Jackie, who has recently passed away at the age of 92, actually fought to stay there and his family was removed. These 2 interviews might offend some listeners because they're going to talk about the Acadian Métis title under the Mikmaq bands, not even the bands, but under the Mikmaq traditional governance system and the treaties in accordance to their existence there prior to 1826 and the ongoing challenge of asserting title before the Sparrow case. Now, this is a monumental case, and this is a very important interview. So I urge you and any other listeners to just consider what they're saying instead of tuning them out. Ongoing persecution of race shifters and pretendians, wannabes, and the dissemination of solid amounts of media to silence voices like this is an ongoing problem. It's a monumental one at that too, because we're not hearing the voices of those that are actively involved in some way or another. The establishment of authority in these situations is something else that needs to be considered. As in the present day Kouchibouguac, there is a Mikmaq presence where ceremony is conducted in some aspects, but it is federally sanctioned, and the space is used to talk about banned governments as well as other relationships between Parks Canada and the Big Cove Band, representing the Mikmaq of that reservation. The families that were expropriated and are currently being represented in this case are not of that band, but have inhabited that territory, and as many of them have been proven to have bloodlines descended from the Mikmaq prior to the establishment of the Indian Act. The protections that they're afforded and the identity that they have as a community is entirely one of their own, but the recognition of that and the investigation and representation of all of that in discovery and other court cases is something that's been tried and tested and contested over and over again without any absolute resolution. So for the sake of this broadcast, they are going to be referred to, as they self-identify, as the Acadian Métis from the Mikmaq, and they're fighting for their title. Here we go.
Pour recevoir justice. Autrement, c'est la politique qui décide. Si que ça leur plaît, c'est bon. Puis si que ça leur plaît pas, ben, ils ingèrent dans les affaires. On est mal fondés pour ça. Nous autres, c'est ça qui nous a arrivé. Oh mon Dieu, il y a assez de choses, moi, que je pourrais faire preuve. Ils n'ont pas mal joué de parler. Ils ont mis le reste du judicata contre moi. Ça fait, ils ne m'ont pas expliqué. J'ai gardé dans la Constitution canadienne, il y a le mot reste judicata et pas de là-dedans. C'est très dur. Oui.
Tu avais ma fille la présence en cours?
Hein?
Dis encore ta dette, tu avais ma fille la présence en cours?
C'est vrai ça.
D'accord.
C'est quoi ce qu'il appelle en anglais le white man's title? On a ça.
Oui.
Ça n'a jamais été décidé dans le cours de loi. Sitôt que j'arrive avec le titre,
Oui.
ils ont mis res judicata contre moi, un mot en latin. Pour pas que je peux expliquer. C'est avoir le droit à la cour.
C'est comme toujours un jeu pour le Canada. C'est pas pour toi, c'est pas ton famille, c'est pas ton corps, c'est le Canada.
Ouais.
C'est ça. Je suis très grateful pour toutes les choses que tu fais.
Ouais.
Merci beaucoup.
No. See what the laws that's applicable in Canada are the laws under the Crown. And that's the only laws that they want to afflict. In the matter of the Métis trying to get rights, and if you say you're an Acadian Métis, the government of Canada says there's no other laws, there's no such laws for the Acadian Métis. So you have to accept that the only laws that that's in force is under the Crown.
Yeah.
So, but the white man's title was given by the Crown. And I don't know how they are going to separate that with the Métis claims. And the Métis claims, if it's claimed, and it is claimed that Métis Acadians. So therefore, the government says in their defense, there's no such a thing as a right for the Métis Acadians. The only rights or titles is under the Crown.
It's their game.
Oh, it's very, very hard. It's very hard. It's a hard going. I don't know where we're going factually. At one time, a way back, I knew where we were supposed to go. But when I found out that we were not getting justice, and I looked into the reasons and found that the reasons were that the politicians would stop you. See, the Minister of Justice is directly in government, and the Minister of Justice is the one who names the judges. And when a judge gets cornered with the evidence, then they speak. And when they speak with the Minister of Justice, he tells them how to act in it. So it's a serious thing. So I don't know if we're getting to an age now that maybe it doesn't matter too much. Maybe in a few years or anytime, we would go. And if we go, we'll go to the other justice. And that's the main one.
Yeah.
Now, that was Jackie Vautours, who passed away in February of this year at the age of 92. You'll notice that he uses the term Acadian Métis, referring to the Acadian peoples who first lived in Nova Scotia, which was Acadia, and then under a secession of the French crown to the English crown through the 7 Years' War and the Treaty of Utrecht, seceded any title to colonies. Now, they never had any control of the title because that title was never gifted to them by the Mikmaq. If anything, the Mikmaq and the baptism of Member 2 and the establishment of Port Royal and all these other issues were monumental parts of the Loyalist versus Mikmaq versus Acadian dynamic, which ended up shaping the Wabanaki Confederacy and other important aspects of culture from the 1700s till the 1800s. But monumentally, what we've seen and what we focus on is the identification and understanding of Indians under the Indian Act in 1870. Now, Kent County, where the park is situated, was established in 1826, where Abraham Pinio Gesner, one of the early ethnographers of a developing New Brunswick, would travel the Métis River in 1830 on portage. Now, the point of this is because Métis was a term of categorization, and it's being understood in the federal context is directly in relationship to the Sparrow test and a few other fundamental Supreme Court tests, something which Kouchibouguac never received due process for because of an 1869 order, which originally was meant to protect the lands, some sensitive sand dunes and other aspects of the abiotic ecosystem. Now, that ended up becoming a huge plan to expropriate the land and develop a park, which now exists today. And it's that park that is the object of the title case fight, because the communities that existed there were never given the due process to be tested under the Sparrow test, because the Acadians that were expropriated from their land in the Great Expulsion followed up Jean-Baptiste Cope, who ended up going all the way to Burnt Church, being chased by a General Monckton. This is at the time where Acadian Mi'kmaq scalps would fetch a price, and it is colonial genocide and all those other aspects of the history we're trying to understand as Canadians to this day. These Acadians settled there, and some married Mi'kmaq, some were raped close to Mi'kmaq communities, and they all had different backgrounds. They had a independent identity. Even the term Kouchibouguac is a misnomer of Mi'kmaq words. And as I mentioned, some of them followed Jean-Baptiste Cope all the way from traditional districts such as Wabanaki. So from what is the land of the groundnut all the way up to Burnt Church, where Burnt Church actually got its name from the burning of the church by the English forces following them up. Anyways, here's Edmund Vautours explaining and talking about where they're at with the current title case.
So, how are things going right now? With I understand the class action suits going forward, and I'm sorry to hear about your father passing away.
Thank you. The case is going pretty good. We had the pleading before the courts, and we're just waiting now for the discovery to start. And after the discovery, there'll be a date for the court.
Okay.
For the trial.
So, is it a continuation of? No, this has nothing to do with the fishing charges, eh? It's
no.
Okay.
This is completely different. This is all to do with the Mikmaq territory in Kouchibouguac.
Awesome. I'm very excited to see how that goes then. With Stephen Augustine, I believe, is helping with that one.
Yes, he's the one who's going to defend the case for us. Awesome. And we signed a contract with Stephen. When he wins, well, it's all for us, the families from Kouchibouguac.
Nice. There's a lot to talk about with this case looming. I don't want to bring up too much of the past that would be uncomfortable, but can you just explain, and it's not to even shorten or not do the whole story justice, because from 1969 until the present day, from Louis Robichaud through Hatfield and to Higgs and the failure of the provincial government.
Yes, well, I can go as fast as I can through that, because it's a long story. But short, in '69 they created the park. They took over the land, they expropriated the land to create a national park, and that was done with the Louis Robichaud government. And that was done the same year that he had his election, and he lost his election, even though he created that park. But when they did create the park, at the time there was I believe $2.5 million to create the park for the people and all that. But half the money went elsewhere, and we don't know really where it went, but it went elsewhere. So the people only got half that money. So after that was done, then Louis Robichaud, he lost his election to Hatfield. Hatfield took over. But the land was already transferred to the federal government. So we were into a big battle then, because know. So many years went by, and many things happened. There was a lot of demonstration. People went to jail. The people they were forced out of their home. They were scared. People from the government will go to the families and tell them, "You better take this offer. But if you don't, you're going to maybe get less." So I advise you to take that offer. So the people were not like all that educated, and when you see people from the government, when they were trying to shy and scared of them. So many of them left, not because they wanted to leave, but they were like forced to leave and scared, and it was very bad things that happened back then. And it showed when it came to the Vautours family, because in '76 when he came and he did took us out of the forest and he did put the bullnose into the house, so and that's all stuff that was said to the other families that he didn't leave. So it was really bad.
Just because it's one incident that was kind of important to remember, and I apologize for bringing it up. When your family was relocated to a motel for a short period, they removed you with tear gas. Isn't that correct?
Yes. The day that they took us out of the morning that they picked us from our home, my father, he was down to work that morning. And I was only a teenager. I was getting ready to go to school. And my sisters too, and my brothers. And the RCMP came in the yard with a bunch of RCMP civil government people were there, and they said to my mother that she had 15 minutes to back, and my mother said, "Well, that cannot be done," and we kind of resisted. So one of the RCMPs said, just before that, my mother said, "Well, I'm going to call my husband," and when she tried to call him, he had cut the phone line, so she couldn't reach him. So then, after a little while, one of the RCMPs said, "Well, I'll go see Mr. Vautours." So he went to see my dad, and then my dad arrived. And when he arrived, then they finished to put the handcuffs on my dad and on us, the boys, and they took us away. Took us to jail, the boys. And my mother and the girl, they got them to their parents. And while we were in jail, my dad said, "Well, when we get out, we'll go back home." But not long after, he received a call at the prison, and he told him that his house was almost around. So they took all our belongings and they put that away in a warehouse somewhere in London, and it stayed there for 2 years. So at last they sold it all in an auction. So all what we had our belongings, that went for an auction. So was pretty bad. But if we come back, the time that we were in the motel, we were there for 6 months. So because after we left the jail, they brought us to a motel, the RCMP, and they said to my dad, "This is your home now." So that's like they kind of joke at it. So anyway, we stayed in there for 6 months, and after 6 months, he was asking my father to pay the rent, but we had 5 rooms. My father says, "No, I had a home, was paid for, and they put me here, and I ain't gonna pay no rent here." No. So he was after us to leave. So one morning, the RCMP came at 6 in the morning, and they went through the doors of access and tear gas and everything else. And they got my father, the first one, and jumped on his bed and put the handcuffs on there and on his legs. And they put a chain across his arms and his legs. They dragged him out to the car and they took him away. Then they went to the next room home to my brothers, and there was a big fight there with tear gas and everything else. And then it came to my room with my brother, and it was the same thing. So we all had the same thing that morning, and we all landed back in jail. So it was a tough day.
I'm sorry about that. That must have been horrifying. Like,
yeah, it's really. You have to live it to really know what. I can explain it, but it's not the same when you live it. But after that, we went to court. My father had won because put charges against us. For that, if we lose, we're going to get each 10 years in jail because of the fighting with the RCMP and all the racket at the motel. But my father won. So after that, we went away for almost a year. No, not a year, a good 6-7 months. Me and my dad, and we went down up Thing, and we went up Sandon River, and we lived by a lake, and that's all we did all summer. We got ourselves in shape. We jogged, we boxed, we left weight, and we were in perfect shape. And then September came, we decided to go back on our lands. So we went back to our lands, and we're there ever since. So that's from 78.
And from
back on our lands.
78 until 2021, your father stayed there with your mother.
Yeah, we're still there. My mother's there, my brother's there. I'm there like every second week. I'm there. But then for these 5-6 days, I come back, I go back. So,
nice.
And my other sisters go down there often too. So we're still there.
That's pretty amazing. With the representation of the families and the land being, well, a lot of people don't even know when they go through. It's still shocking to me that when you drive through Kouchibouguac that it's so hidden, the expropriation, that there's no...
Yes, it is. And we're still having a hard time with the division of people, right? Because that's where our main problem was all through the years of my father, is the division among our own people. So we have a group that's there that wants to park. We have the other group that wants to recognize what happened and want back their land and want justice. And today is still the same thing. If we look back, there was a documentary done with the Acadian Shaw and my father, and many families that spoke on there, members from the government. And now I heard that yesterday, that they're making another documentary on Kouchibouguac to speak with the families. And the people that are doing that, they're not even in our cast action. No. And why are they doing that? No.
Propaganda?
Maybe. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right at all. And they made what they call a monument in St. Louis at the school. And they had all the names of the families on there. They made a big splash with that. But there was only certain members, there was only certain families that was called to that. And it was only done with certain members' families. And none of those families are in our lawsuit. So you see the division there is. So that's going on. I'm having a hard time with that because I'm trying to keep my people together. And our family on the other side is trying to put them away. So.
Yeah, the incentive to just roll over was pretty big. Having to fight so long, did it change I'm going to overshare here. I visited your father before and I've gone in, and I noticed that it was mostly gift cards and donations and stuff that was assisting them through the winter, like being cared for by community. Can you explain that?
Okay, I don't think I understood right the question.
what was the role of community taking care of your family? Like people supporting you guys? Was there a continuation of that community? You're talking about keeping your people together, and I'm just asking.
We had my parents always lived there. Like we were all there when we were kids when we got back on the land. But after a while, we got older. We had to go to work. But my parents stayed there as a thing. But we had to stay in suffering. But we could never add electricity or they lived like there was no washroom, nothing, and we couldn't do nothing to help them more because I tried to bring them out of their mini home, and I was stopped by First Canada, and they told me, well, they had to live in their suffering, but if they didn't want to live out of the park, they're ready to build them a house, but if they live in there, they had to live in those conditions. That was really, really bad. But we had the support of the families. Families go by, Christmas time, they bring food and stuff, and we always had good fun people that support us. So that was good.
Mm. And with that support, celebration of Acadians, of community members of Kouchibouguac from Clairefontaine and like those areas, what's the legacy? What's the main? Because you guys still gather as community, right? Like you still come together and talk and share things.
Yes, because on the land, me and my brother, we made what we call in English sacred fire.
Oh yeah.
We made a big circles, and then we added a big teepee, and we put our flags, Mikmaq flag and the Acadian flag, Mikmaq flag, Inhabit flag, and the warrior flag. So we have all those flags on our property, and we do ceremonies there. And when it came a few weeks back with those children, all those children that was found that was murdered, well, we did a fire for 7 days. We kept the fire going and everything. And so people come and they come and join us. So we do that down there.
Why is it important to do that?
Well, it's important. That's our the culture, right? We kind of like Metis people. We kind of lost it. And we're trying to bring it back and learn from our ancestors and elders, and try to learn what we had lost. It's important to know our culture because it was hidden from us, our culture.
Mm. So with Kouchibouguac and growing up, and like this is the big case. It's a court case to declare it as a Mikmaq community.
Mikmaq territory, yeah.
And that's fighting the sparrow test and fighting all this other stuff. Are you nervous with? Do you understand the federal laws? Are you aware of like how you're going to fight it?
If I'm nervous, well, I'll just put it in another way. A few months ago, First Canada, they sent me a letter. They offered my mother help to take out everything out of there, all the belongings, the trailers and everything. So it's like if they want to come and take us out of there again. And some people ask me, are you nervous? Are you scared? My God. Since we lived that all our life, the last 50 years, no, we're not scared. No, not at all. No. We are our rights, and we're on the lands, and we're under Stephen Augustine's protection, and they have no right to touch us under the protection of Stephen Augustine because it's unceded Mikmaq territory.
Mm. So it's unceded Mikmaq territory you're living on, fighting for the protection of your family's historic communities that have existed there. And like this is huge. So I commend you for participating and honoring your ancestors and family. Like, what what do you think is going to be the end goal if you guys get the protection, you win the case? What's going to happen next if you guys win?
Well, the matter before the court was Stephen Augustine. If when we win, I don't want to say if. I say when we win, because it was a non-ceded territory. It was only a treaty of peace down there. Okay? Mm-hmm. And when we win, well, we'll get back on the land for sure, and then we'll have a discussion with Stephen Augustine and see how we'll go about with everything from there on. Right now, I don't know what direction we'll take when that happens, but for sure, we want the land back.
It's going to have to look at like the communities that existed there, and then use the sparrow test to see if they're applicable and honorable. And it's going to first, though, it's going to have to regard the 1725 through 1752 treaties, because the 52 treaty is the one where the Acadian expropriation happened, right? So the Acadian expulsion and like all the communities that go up north from here to Burnt Church, all of that was on unceded territory at the time. So,
that's right.
So that's what the sparrow test is actually going to test against. It's going to be against those historic communities and your guys' continued legacy in them. So that's going to be a crazy task.
Yeah, well, I know it's going to be tough, but the main goal is to win, and after that, there'll be a lot of decisions done afterwards. How we'll apply it. I know we like to learn our culture, and there's a lot of us we have to learn. And when we talk about Acadian people, well, the Acadians, they're all 99% of them, they're all Métis. They all have Métis blood, so there's a lot to be learned.
Yes, with the French, English, Mikmaq, Woolstic divide in New Brunswick, growing up, what did you see for education? What did you see for racism? Like, because anybody listening to this today is not going to have an understanding of what you grew up through and what you were born into and what was there before that. So growing up, what was it like to be where you're from and have the identity that you have?
Growing up, like we were not teach who we were. We were not teach. I remember when we were young, my father he thought there was native burial grounds just across the river. So there was the native people living all around things before. And my grandfather, he remembered more of that too. We were like living together. They would fish together, they would hunt together. Because we had the same like culture from way back then. We would fish with the salmon nets and all the same sort of culture. But we kind of lost that through the years. So we didn't have the right education. So I think we have to get that back.
So when you get that back, get the land back, that kind of connection to cultural identity is important. You can't get this connection back to the Mikmaq if you were anywhere else, right?
No.
You can't just go off to Toronto and still Skype in.
I didn't understand the connection.
Sorry, that was a bad joke to kind of lighten the mood. I'm saying you can't go anywhere else in the world and have this connection to the community. No, it's geographic.
Yeah.
It's seasonal and it's ecologic.
Yeah. What I would like is to see more Mikmaq people, more Métis people get together and see them come down to the lands out there and do some ceremonies with us and support us more. Because the bottom line, I think we all want to share the same thing. With the lands, the culture, the teaching. I think that's
protect those teachings? Like, say an elder comes down and they tell you, we need a space for this to be sacred, to always be used in ceremony for 7 generations to come. Would you respect and honor that teaching?
Yes, yeah.
If you had an elder come down carrying a copper pail with water and she's praying for the water and she's got youth walking with her and they want to walk through and they want to honor the water, would you honor that teaching?
Well, I'll honor all the teaching that I can learn from the Mikmaq people for sure. All the teaching they can teach us, yes, I would honor that. Yes, I would honor that would come and they would make ceremonies. Because if we go back maybe 15 years ago, it used to be Mikmaq people would come down from Big Cove and they would come see my father and mother. They would make ceremonies and they would smoke the pipe and get the drums. And then one day they all took canoes and they went across the river and they found the burial ground on the funeral lot. So that was a good experience.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that. Just because I don't want to take too much of your time up. I think we're at 30 minutes. Do you want to keep going?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
The Kouchibouguac, it's a long story, eh?
Yeah.
And some people they don't know the right story. Some people know if you look at villages that's away from there, like St. Louis and Mikmaq, they want the park because of the tourists. And but the people that live there, they're the ones that lost. One thing, tourists, but way back then, my father, he had met with Acadian, and he says, create your park, no problem. Leave the people there. Develop the area, and the tourists will come, and everybody is going to be happy. But John Acadian says, no, he says, everybody has to leave. Everybody has to leave.
Yeah.
And John Acadian, he was a minister of Indian Affairs.
Yep.
So the money that came out of there at the time was money from the Indian Affairs. So I see how we were all lost in those years. We didn't really understood why it was Indian Affairs back then, but now we know better today because it was it's made Mikmaq territory.
Yeah. That's really the tricky part is the level of oversight the feds give into management of the park, the money that comes from the park, and the province really did sell the land or something. So selling Indian land and doing stuff they probably weren't supposed to do probably violated a lot of laws. It was a criminal act, maybe. So.
Yeah. Well, it was a criminal act. We did it for sure. They took charge of people that had much education. They did. A lot of them died because of that. The older people, when they had to move away in other villages, they died because they were lonely of their place. They missed where they were from, and they died suffering. So there was a lot of suffering that happened to the people in Kouchibouguac. When we look way back, I think if they could kill us all back then, I think they would have did it. So how bad it was. Which they tried to already kill my father and my mother. They almost drowned her. The time that they were fishing clams. They had been fishing clams one summer, and they got stopped by Parks Canada, and they went to court, and the judge, said to my father and mother, go back and fish. So after the winter passed, they went back the next summer, and they were attacked this time by one RCMP parts Canada, 2 parts Canada. And my father up with a belly stick and the pepper spray, and he was yellow. He got shit on his shoulder, they broke his arm. And my mother, they held her under the water until she couldn't breathe. And when they took her back out of the water, she took one breath. They put her back under the water, and she passed out. So that's all stuff that happened, but it seemed that nothing can be done about it. That's why I'm so pissed off sometimes.
Yeah. How do you not give up? How do you not lose it when this is your life?
I think it's a strength from my father, because when my father had mentioned that already, all what we went through, and we never did nothing bad. We never killed nobody through that. So we were pretty solid. Because many times came close, but that's not what we wanted to do. We were looking for justice. But it came close a few times, and we were able to have control, and we still have control of ourselves today.
Yeah. Wow. I cannot imagine having that kind of self-control. Composure is important. With that being said, you were pissed off. You're losing your livelihoods. You never took it out on anybody. How would you feel from like the Acadian, Métis perspective and the Mikmaq? Because you acknowledge these things, that there's treaty rights and there's land rights, and it's the Mikmaq first. You acknowledge that. How come there's been Acadians that have gone off to attack Mikmaq? Like, it's kind of amazing to me that there's people that don't know their own history enough that they got that identity and they go and they attack Mikmaq. Why?
That's because those that do that is what they call the, I ever said, the Acadian, the elite, those ones are higher, the association, they're the one running the show. And the Acadian people, you should understand where they come from. And in 1755, when the deportation, it's the big mother that saved them. And some of them don't seem to realize that it wouldn't be for the big buck people, they wouldn't be there today.
Right. Jean-Baptiste Coupe, who took Mikmaq through he took Mikmaq and Acadians through a few different districts up to Burnt Church, where Moncton or another general like that burned down the church, and that's how it got the name Burnt Church.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that history, why is this not being taught? Why is this not part of what people honor?
I like I say, it's the higher ones that should plow the road right. In other words, and they understand about the people, where they come from, what happened. And that's all. That comes to the teaching through school and everything. So that's where a lot of problems are. People are all so mixed up. You have a group here, you have a group there, another group, and if everybody get together and be one, and have one strength, my God, it'd be a lot better.
Right. So, you said something that plowed the road right. Est-ce que tu peux dire ça en français, dans l'Acadie?
How did you say that?
Could you say that that saying in French, plow the road the right way? That sounds like a pretty Acadian saying.
Yeah. Plow the road, meaning the ones that did it like all, and the higher places, you could lead the people, the Acadians, on the right path, show them, learn them the true meanings of everything and where they're from, and how the Mikmaq people saved them in 1755. And so, but even though they have Métis blood, they will not want to recognize that because some of them don't want to lose that they don't have, I can't call it a status, an Acadian status. That they should find out who they are first of all, and where they come from, and from there understand.
And it's not understanding privilege, it's understanding responsibility, right? Like you guys, you're not trying to claim anything and get something of it. You're saying, no, this is where we come from, this is where we're staying, and this is our responsibility?
Yes, that's what yeah. Oh, it's where we're from. We're from Kouchibouguac. We were born there, our parents were born there, their grandparents were born there, and we want to learn our culture, where we're from. If we have ancestors and it's in our blood, they should teach us, and we should get together with the mikmaw. We should all be together and learn the culture. It's not a matter of getting something from them. That's not what it is, no. If we're entitled to what we are, that's our rights. No.
Yeah. That's pretty cool stuff. What was it like being away while your father was there for so long? Having to go back and forth and wait on your family and see how this is going and see the costs it's had to them, because it's cost them their lives.
It's sad, and my father's not there no more when I go down there. And we don't know what's going to happen to us from one day with another down there. Because my father, he was a big part of us. He has a lot of strength, interior strength. And when I'm there, like the other day, there's another CMP came and spoke to me. And police, okay, he wanted to understand certain things, and I explained to him, and he's okay with certain things. But my mother's still there. My mother, it's hard for her because my father's not there no more. It's a big part of praise God. But to see that we're there and supporting what my father did and keep going the battle, it's a lot for her. She's proud of that.
Wow. That's pretty heavy. That's a lot to be proud of, though. Sorry, the barking dog distracted me. I lost my train of thought. The expropriation, the cost of being there, waiting on the court date. You've got Michael Swinwood as your lawyer with Ellie Without Borders and Stephen Augustine representing as well.
If we go back way back in the 76, my father, he was preparing a big meeting with the Chief Levi back then and other councils from the Cove, and they were ready to get on the land and dispense and start hunting and trapping. And they were going to have a big meeting with my father and also from politicians from the government. And something strong was going to happen. I think a good chance that they were going to get the land back. But when they seen that was happening, the power that my father had and had with Levi and the Mikmaq people, 3 days before the meeting, that's when they destroyed my father. That's when they put a bulldozer to the house. So that meeting never happened. That changed everything afterwards.
And you haven't had any relationship with bound councils in Big Cove since then?
No.
Okay.
Only the relationship I had is with Dean and Augustine, and I'm willing to talk to any of them if they want to talk to me and understand what's going on.
Well, I can't get an expression from that community regarding this issue. I've sent emails and requested meetings before. The park does employ Mikmaq cultural leaders and things for events. Having that presence there, doesn't it kind of make you question your pursuit of staying there?
Not really, no, because band council and chief and that, the only power they have is on the reserve, but they don't have the power out of the reserve.
So you've never once resented or felt Mijan or anything about the other communities?
I didn't understand right to your question.
You've never felt upset about how well the other...
No, because we're mostly dealing with Stephen Augustine and the Grand Council, and the band and chief on the reserve, or you can't interfere from what we're doing with the Grand Council and Stephen Augustine. You can't interfere in there.
Okay, so from 76, where you were working with the band council, to the now you're working with the Grand Council, the traditional government system that exists from the Mikmaq districts, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're working to acknowledge traditional territorial claims, not just of where you live, but for all of Mikmaq.
Well, what we're doing right now is for the area at Kouchibouguac. That's what we're pushing for.
Okay.
For the area at Kouchibouguac. Whatever after that probably open more doors for the big ball people afterwards, I'm sure.
Okay. So say you got visitors to your land from Wabanaki. Would you honor that?
If I would honor them?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Nice. That's pretty cool.
They come and see us, they'll sit down, we'll make a circle fire, and we'll talk, and 100% with that.
I like that. So you're trying to put all the respect you can out there, you're fighting. Is there anything you would tell, if you saw somebody that was in for the long haul, they got to sit down and commit to the fight that they believe in, what would you tell them? What would be your advice?
If some people will be in struggling in a hard time, you say?
Yeah, so like you remember the Oka crisis, right?
Yeah.
All right, so there's youth all over the country that are trying to take their land back, that are trying to stand up and hold their land. What would you say to somebody that's in it for the long haul? You're like, you want to occupy this land, you want to live here and claim back your title, your identity, your community, all that. What advice would you
tell them to stay strong, stay together, and the power is to stay together. Don't divide. Don't let them conquer you by division. That's where you lose.
Nice. Do you have any thoughts on those things, like the federal government fighting with Native peoples all over the country?
I think it's really bad what the government is doing, and I think the way they're using the Indigenous people, it's terrible. There's a lot of lies they're saying to those people, a lot of promises that they don't do. I think and if you look back, Indian affairs is one of the worst things that ever exists, I think, for the Indigenous people. You had to self-governance themselves to be a lot better than the way they're living today on the reserve. When Indian affairs is throwing money to the chiefs, and most of the people on the reserve, they don't even know half the time what's going on. And a lot of reserves are still poor today, and why should they be? They shouldn't be poor today. They should healthy. But it's all called the Indian affair. It's all control that he had in the affair. He controlled all the reserves to the chiefs and council.
If you had to give up, if you had to give up the, that's a terrible question, sorry. You've gone fishing there, you've gone clamming there, you've lived there, you've had birthdays, deaths, anniversaries, like, what can you imagine would drive people to ignore that? Why would they not be able to see you guys suffering?
I think the people, they have a hard time to, I think a lot of people are suffering. They're suffering in their own way. And I think they have a hard time just to get together and to do something. I think if so many years went by and so many stuff that happened to the people, that's unreal. And today, if the matters are get together and have a power together, the power, the strength, the energy to do something, and it's hard to get the people together today. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't let it end there, man. That's too sad of an ending for the interview.
Pardon?
I said we can't let it end there. That's too sad of an ending for the interview.
Well, we can keep going.
Yeah, I can't imagine day in, day out. So you're farming there again from the Facebook post. I love farming. It's one of my favorite, like not gardening, but proper farming where your aim is to feed yourself. You got to do rotational crops and you got to go out there every day and do water management and things like that and make sure everything's taken care of. Living that way and being able to say, no, this is us and we're taking care of ourselves the same way we've taken care of ourselves for this long. Is there pride in that? Are you proud of that?
Well, when you fight for your rights and you fight for your culture and you fight to you know where you come from, I'm proud of what we're doing. Yes.
Nice. But like food security, being able to feed yourself, how important is that?
Be able to feed myself?
Yep.
It's important to feed ourselves. If we can't feed ourselves, we won't survive.
Right? But like with the land around you, like not going to the Sobeys, not going to...
On the land, I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
Where we live, if you pinpoint a circle 5 kilometers straight on the circle, in those 5 kilometers, we had fish, we had lobsters, we had trout, we had bass, we had all sorts of fish. And then we had gardens that we make. And then after that, we had the apple trees, we had the berries, we had all the food. It's all around us. So we could live without have to go to Sobeys. And there's not many cases that you can see you can have all that. In a circle of 5 kilometers. But because we had it all around us. The people was rich on all the stuff all around them, from fish, hunting, trapping. They had it all.
What was your favorite thing to harvest from your home?
Harvest?
Yep.
Well, we used to make gardens, and I like a lot of fishing. I like do. I can't think of that.
Growing up, so you went away for 7 months, and then you came back. When you're younger, you're talking about that. When you got back, what were you looking most forward to eating?
Well, there we used to trap rabbits in the fall. We used to get moose, deer. We used to do our fishing too. We had everything. Really, it was not stuck to. We had to go to the grocery store every day.
Yeah.
Well, we grew up and we had all those everything, to survive. And even back then, the Mikmaq people lived down there too. We had the same thing as us. We had all that luxury fishing and fishing eagles and trapping and.
And you'd welcome that back, like you said, in 1976. You guys were trying to do that anyways, just bring that back.
Yeah, well, we love the place. There's something down there that it's hard to explain, but when I'm down there and I go for a ride in the boat and get a certain time in the evening there, maybe around 6, 7 o'clock, there's something down there that you can feel it's really powerful. Like spirits or whatever. There's something down there that's really holds us to the ground. Sorry about my English. I kind of lost my English the last 15 years. I mostly talk French. Now I got a hard time with my English.
I'm sorry, my French is terrible. I didn't learn it at all. I really should have done more to try and learn it.
But you had to understand there was 238 families that lived down there. Yep. There's all those little villages, Fontaine, Clairefontaine, Saint-Denis, Cap-Saint-Louis, there's all those little villages. And it was quite a. If you look down back in the 1755, when they did the deportation of the Acadians, or if you look down in Kouchibouguac, there were 7 villages that destroyed everything. So you could call that another deportation too.
Yeah. The last thing that was in court with your father, it was the case he lost before he passed, and I'm sorry to bring it up, is the fishing one that they kept in. They kept it going. Like they would stall it at weird times, and there was a lot to that fight. And I remember speaking before that case. And one thing that they said in that case was it was already decided. It was decided at another previous court case, and they fined him money for daring to go up against the Crown again or something stupid. How'd that whole ordeal feel?
Well, back then we didn't have much of a lawyer back then. So I remember when my father and mother were charged for fishing and all that. At the same time, they almost got my mother and almost beat my father up to that. But when it went to court, they kind of separated everything. He put my mother on one side, and then he put her to jail for 9 days. And then my father, he tried to represent himself, but it didn't work out. So one morning he came to court, and there was a lawyer there coming for him. So it was put there by the government. So right after that, not good. And that lawyer, he didn't know nothing about Indigenous laws, nothing at all. He didn't know nothing. So when it came to the meeting case, well, he kind of put everything like in a basket, if you could say that. But the judge, he found my father was guilty, but then then he turned around and said you could be also Acadian, but then he said you had no right because you could not prove a Métis community. So that's how it went. So.
And this is where it gets really dangerous, because if you guys are able to define who and when Métis originated in regards to the federal government, that's going to be really important for how Métis law is decided by the federal government, because the way it works is it's set by precedent. So that's why this is such a dangerous court case, isn't it?
Yeah, no, if you look, well, the way we're when we went to court last year, well, the judge he didn't want to recognize us as Métis first of all, and we couldn't go back to court because he said the case was heard for years and years and years in different courts. So we had to get over there and just go with Stephen Augustine on the Mikmaq. Okay? So that's how it went to that judge Wallet there. So that's why we're under the protection of Stephen Augustine. He signed a contract with us to make sure everything is okay. So.
And to you, that's really important, because you're signing a contract with the traditional government, but you're signing a contract not with the Crown, not with the feds, but with the direct treaty and title holders of the land, right?
Yes, right. That's important.
Okay, that does sound really important, because, like I said, this is a dangerous court case for how the feds are going to react, but you don't care. You're fighting through the Mikmaq because you believe.
Yeah, through the Mikmaq.
All right.
Because we all if you go back behind, we are the children of the Mikmaq. We are Métis, but we are the children of the Mikmaq.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough fight. Because I'm going to be honest with you, if you go to Nova Scotia and there's not, and Métis is a joke to a lot of Native communities.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's pretty shitty, eh?
Yeah, it's because I think there's so many organizations that's Métis everywhere, and if we all get together and have one strength, it's a lot better than the way it's going on now.
But that's tricky though, because they all claim to be Métis, but they're from a different original tribe, right? So like, just because if you go all together as one big pool of Métis, and then you have a Métis government, well, that Métis government's already going to be in competition with the reserve government, right? Because they're all going to be fighting for the same treaty funds. They're going to be fighting to the same access of this, and this. But Métis can't really do that from all over the country, because that takes away from title in one area. It's like this competition of centralization and decentralization within policy, right? So if you support the treaties and you want to live on the Mikmaq lands, and you're fighting that, and that's the fight you're fighting.
Right.
What kind of risk do you see? Is it if the feds find a way to shut it down?
Well, I think they're going to have a hard time to shut it down, because as you call it, the treaties and everything, it's going to be hard for the government. Because if you look back now with the reconciliation with the Mikmaq people, they're supposed to sit down and reconcile and negotiate with the Mikmaq people. That's the first thing you're supposed to do.
Yep.
They shouldn't even go to trial. They should sit down. And that's why if you go in the Supreme Court of Canada, it says in the Supreme Court of Canada that when the issues with Mikmaq people, you have to reconcile and sit down and negotiate and try to settle things, without going to court. So.
With other provincial land claims coming forward, lost away land claims along the lower southwest western side of the province, and then the northeast can be Mikmaq land claims. Do you think you're going to get lost in all of these battles, or do you think yours is going to be like one that sets more off?
Well, I don't think we're going to get lost. We're just going to concentrate on what we're doing and what we're going for. If we try to go back and forth, east and west and whatever, then we're going to get lost. But to stay focused on what we're doing and what we're claiming, I think we should have no problem there.
Well, that's a lot to undertake, and you're hoping to be in court within the year with COVID and everything too?
Well, I think before that, I think I give 6 to 8 months we should be in court.
Okay. Is there anything you would urge listeners to do if they want to learn more, if they want to participate?
I think what we could do is, first of all, we all know where Kouchibouguac is, and we're willing to talk to anybody that wants to talk with us. We still and try to understand our case, and we try to understand their thinking. And I think if they want to contact me anytime they want on Facebook, they can, to know more about our case. I'm willing to talk to anybody.
All right. That's all I've got for you today, sir.
And this is where I'm going to leave you with the Kouchibouguac story, because really we have to wait 6 months before discovery. The RCMP have released a letter through Parks Canada, or something that Edmund mentioned, where their property might be seized again. Miss Vautours is still living there. They're farming on land, and they're waiting. It's going to be a monumental treaty case because it's going to look at title to land and how it can be acquired and purchased, and if expropriations can be upheld. Parks Canada did change its policy after the expropriation of Kouchibouguac, but it never, returned the land. So that is in itself the continued challenge, because from 1969 until now, one fixture of the lands has been the Vautours, regardless if Parks Canada claims the national park or not. Before 1969 until now, one fixture of the park was the Vautours, because it wasn't a park, it was a community. And essentially that's what's going to be tested and challenged, and it's really going to come down to how well the Sparrow test can be applied and acknowledged regarding Indigenous peoples and their descendants, because it has been proven through lineage assessments and things that they are of descent in the Vautour family. At least Jackie had 7 different bloodlines that were cited in the court case where the creation story was used and represented. And of course, I'm referring to the Mikmaq creation story of the 7 districts, where the 7 districts in the original Mikmaq title were practiced and respected, the Gluscap story. And the point being is that traditional sense of governance and respect and all that other stuff was brought before the court, and then the court made a decision without acknowledging the fact that there was 10 separate communities in that area that existed prior to the establishment of Kent County, which again goes back to the 1770s and 1780s and 1790s, and the Wabanaki Compact and the Mikmaq siding with the Acadian militias, as well as the Wolastoqiyik, Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, and Abenaki nations to keep New England fishers out, and then eventually loyalists coming in after the American Revolution, where they were given title to lands that they had never lived on, the creation of Nova Scotia, and then it's the actual history, the actual important things that we should be discussing instead of identity politics, which essentially is the same thing that's going to shut people out from listening to this interview, because they're going to be so focused on how wrong it is to use the word Métis in New Brunswick. It's actually, if you go on the Canadian Encyclopedia, you can search up the article, The Other Métis, because the idea is the essential enfranchised totalitarian existence of the Métis is a prairies thing. When in 1830 and well before the Indian Act, there was the Métis Rivers, and it's a term. Now, if these people are to be acknowledged as a separate nation, or a nation that exists under the Mikmaq, or not even as a nation, but people who have title to exist within that nation, That's the thing that should be understood. In reality, though, with the negotiations of treaties and the allocations of treaty monies and the development of ongoing First Nations and their development, they have a different relationship with the feds, the federal government. And with that relationship being so weighty and developed out of codependence and the fight for freedom, if the Acadian voice is heard at all remains to be seen. It's acknowledged, as Stephen Augustine is a leader of sorts in the Mikmaq communities and is someone that's put time into this with the lawyer Michael Swinwood, who's from a group that represent Elders Without Borders and fights for a decolonial version of Indigenous existence. Swinwood, in an interview, talked about how important the Sparrow Test is in Canadian federal policy and how that federal policy can be used to actually develop reconciliation. Now, that is going to be the crux of the issue. And I will not speak any more on it because I'm not participating in such a class action suit, and I have no connection to the issue beyond that. I'm glad and thank you for your time because, as I mentioned, the Métis issue in the Maritimes is something that is met with great hate from certain First Nations groups, certain people, even allies groups. Right now, a big thing is the persecution of pretendians, wannabes, and I forget what the other term is, race shifters. Yes, race shifters. It's a term that was created by an academic who basically established his own formula and system of investigation to prove lineage and how much someone has the right to claim indigeneity, which is essentially just a continuation of the blood quantum and validation practices. But it's also a validation of the identities of those First Nations that have been removed from reservations, that still live on reservation, that are connected to community or disconnected through adoption and other things. So it really is a monumental issue. But the trick is, at the end of the day, it's about money. Parks Canada makes money off of Kouchibouguac. They are able to employ people from Big Cove and other First Nations to talk about banned governments, and they make money. The financial continuation of something, economically speaking, is very, very, very important to the federal government, the provincial government, and others. So their employment of academics, their employment of documentarians, their employment of people to produce things to uphold their truth is essentially the most important thing in their continued existence when it comes to survival. The rationale and where we as a society put our weight, our hope in, is the rule of law. The application of that rule of law and how the judge can sit down and listen to a court case is determined by other proximal determinants. And that's the reality of the situation. Is we're playing a long game as Canadians. We want to exist as Canadians. First Nations want to exist as First Nations. The Acadians, especially the Vautours, they just want to exist on their land. Now, that's what I'm talking about with identity politics, is it's metaphysical. It is the practice of upholding a connection, a social connection to something through policy, through accepted truths, through those things. With the practice of treaties and other obligations of inherent rights, it is the acceptance and development of something between two groups that exist independently. With the Indian Act and the establishment of disenfranchisement and enfranchisement, so you get disenfranchised from the land, you don't have your inherent rights anymore, but you are enfranchised to the body politic. That practice was all that existed for the 1900s, well after the establishment of the Fisheries Act in the 1870s and the Indian Act, until the 1980s, where it's the adoption of a constitution and then the respect of native rights in Section 35 of that constitution. Those things were practiced after the establishment of the park. So this court case in 6 months is going to be very important, but it's already been horribly misrepresented because the amount of people that are looking to put the story in a slant. The existence of the Métis Acadians in Kouchibouguac has nothing to do with the Brasse d'Or Métis or those that claim status in other regions, because the significant difference here is this group has protection because there was multiple communities that existed in this area, and that is something that's going to be challenged and tried, hopefully. All right, that's all the time I have for you today. Thank you again for listening. This is Jared Durrell for CHSR. I'll see you next week, Dreamers.